Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, September 21st, 2020, and today I'm going to be talking about the 2020 election and the impact of the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So the Supreme Court has always been a number one issue for Democrats. They've been looking to replace her seat following the 2020 election. Because of the fact she has passed away, the Republican Party is poised to replace her within the next 45 days or during the next lame duck session. Until January 2021, the Democratic Party cannot be sure that there will be a replacement that they can have, that a replacement that they'd be comfortable with. The Republican Party is looking to be able to push forth another nominee, which means the Supreme Court will have 6 conservatives and 3 liberals, which means it'll be one of the most lopsided Supreme Courts we've seen in decades. And looking at the possibility that Trump does put forward this nomination, it's very likely that he puts forth the nomination tomorrow or the day after, and that a number of senators will come out in support of Amy Barrett being the new Supreme Court Justice. It seems all signals are pointing towards her. It looks like she's the clear favorite to be the next Supreme Court nominee. And we do have to discuss whether or not certain people will be voting against her as a potential nominee or against any Trump nominee in general. 2 Republicans, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska and Susan Collins from Maine, both of which have said we will not be voting for a nominee, but that puts the Democrats at 49. They need 2 more to block Vice President Mike Pence's tiebreaker in the event that there's a 50-50 vote, and then 51 obviously just cuts it off immediately, so they need 2 more senators to block the nomination, and it doesn't seem too likely that they're going to get it. I've been updating the map ever so often, so this is where it stands today. Today is Monday, September 21st, and it looks like there are 29 no comment Republican senators. So the number of senators who have said that they would support a vote have increased to a total of 21 senators, 49 in opposition, 1 formerly opposed but no comment now, and then, like I said, the 29 others which have no comment, but we can guarantee almost all of them, if not all of them, will be Republican votes for a Trump nominee, regardless of who it is. So moving past that point, let's go ahead and take a look at the 2020 electoral map and talk about what RBG's death puts on the Democratic Party this election. So we've been talking about how this election is shaping up to be one of the most important elections in decades. I mean, we're talking about a global pandemic, an economic collapse, civil rights issues, now the Supreme Court, women's rights, climate change, gun control, all of these things that have been culminating over the past 4 years are super important to this election. It just seems, that it was maybe 5-10 years ago that we were talking about gun control. It just seems as if this year's been drawn on so long, and it has. I mean, we are 42 days until the presidential election, and there are so many things that are so important to voters around this country that in a normal election year, people would just be voting on the economy. They'd be voting on, certain issues, one-issue voters. But you can practically find no one-issue voters this presidential election because of the fact that there's so many things happening all at once, and the Supreme Court has now added on a lot of weight on the Democratic Party because they can push this nomination off. They can find a way to block senators from, pushing forth Trump's nominee. That's possible. It's a very real reality. I will say that if Trump wins the election, there's no holding out. I mean, there's no possibility that the Democratic Party could postpone it unless they win the Senate. And realistically, it's harder for them to win the Senate than win the presidency. It's actually more likely for the GOP to retain control of the Senate than it is for them to win the White House again, which means Biden probably won't get a nomination passed for 4 years. It's very possible that the Republican Party does this, and even if the 2022 midterms roll around, they would still block it. Unless the Democratic Party was able to win the Senate then, which it is possible, but also Biden would be the incumbent president. So no matter how I cut this, the Democratic Party is likely to end up short. If they win the Senate and they win the presidency, it's possible Republicans revert on their promise before the presidential election and vote for a nominee in a lame duck session, which opens the opportunities for the Democrats to pack the courts. Now, if we're looking at the possibility of a Biden administration on top of a Republican Senate, they probably won't get a nomination passed until a new president is in. To be completely honest, we've seen it go so partisan that people will push this off a lot longer than you might expect. And then moving past that, there's also the very real possibility that the Democrats lose the presidency and somehow win the Senate. It's possible. It's not impossible by any means. I mean, we've seen some Senate candidates outperform Joe Biden, Cal Cunningham, Mark Kelley. So some of these people that, could possibly win the Democrats the Senate, it is possible that if Trump is able to turn this election around in the next 40 days or so, that he ends up winning the presidency and the Democrats win the Senate. Trump would likely get that nomination passed in a lame duck, and then he would never nominate someone to go onto the Supreme Court. So the Senate would really just have no power at that point in terms of SCOTUS nominations. So the Democratic Party could very well come up short regardless of what happens this time around. But I do think that the Democratic Party is also going to get a very large bump from Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. The Democratic Party raised so much money in the past couple of days because the Democratic Party has seen the very real severity of the situation. It has become very, very important for Democrats across this country that they win this election, because they need to ensure that if Trump, he can't win his reelection bid. If he does, then the court's probably gone. I mean, absolutely. 6-3, when we're talking about the youngest Republican or conservative justice being 72, that's at least, 13 years, assuming they retire at 85. It's possible that, once Trump nominates someone to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if it's Amy Barrett, we're talking about people in their 50s. Kavanaugh's 55. We're talking about a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, not just now, not just 10 years from now, not just 20 years from now, but 30 years from now. So the Democratic Party is going to be putting forth every effort, because this election was already not like any other. But now, more than ever, I love that statement because it's so true. Now more than ever, the Democratic Party has so much banking on this election. And if they lose, it'll be at the fault of themselves. On top of that, they will be likely responsible for a lot of the things that the Trump administration does do, because of the fact that this election was very winnable from the beginning. Very, very winnable from the beginning. Look at this map. We have 196 safe electoral votes for the Democrats, 70 for the Republicans. 196 versus 70, 217 competitive, electoral votes. We've seen states that were never even considered competitive on both the Senate level and the presidential level competitive now. We're talking about Texas, Georgia, Arizona. And Joe Biden, he is absolutely going to get a bump from, all of the recent events that have been unfolding, not just Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, but also COVID-19 and the economy. And he's only up right now, not only up. I'm not going to say that because that's grossly underestimating him. 6.8% is a very strong lead going into the final stretch of the campaign season. We're almost 1 month away. Even Trump led Clinton at some point in time in 2016. Trump has never led Biden. Not once. Never. So what we're seeing is that Biden is maintaining a lead. This election has been so stagnant. It's been the same throughout the entirety of the campaign season. And now the Democratic Party is likely to put forth every effort because they really need support in these battleground states in order to win the election. The Democratic Party was already the favorite in Colorado, in New Mexico, in Nevada, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Minnesota. That puts them at 270. But if they really do, if they have this momentum that they're going to get, that they have right now, that's entering in, that we're starting to see bump up as election data is being released today, we're going to see the Democratic Party do much better. Because this is not a 24-hour news cycle issue. There will be a vacancy on the Supreme Court. And it doesn't matter. I mean, at this point, Obamacare is practically gone. Obamacare is gone as we know it, unless, Trump nominates a liberal to the Supreme Court or one of the justices moves over. Because if it's a tie in the Supreme Court and there's a vacancy, it goes down to the lower court ruling, which practically scrapped Obamacare. So that's gone. That's something the Democratic Party needs to worry about. Unless they convince a Republican to move over, or a conservative. I don't know why I say Republican. I get they're nonpartisan, but we all know how they typically vote. Unless we see a conservative move over to the, liberal side and side with Obamacare, it's going to be very difficult for a lot of Obamacare policies to be implemented or continue being implemented. Because let's say Trump wins the election, right? And he's able to nominate a Supreme Court justice. They could question everything that the Democrats have passed in the past. And new precedent takes over old precedent. Roe v. Wade could be gone. LGBT rights could be gone and reversed back to the states, and then we would just see a separation between the South and the North. A number of things that we all thought were in the past could very well be brought back up. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing not only makes an impact on the Supreme Court, but the Democratic Party's policies and laws that they have passed in previous elections, or at least just previous years, that very well could be in jeopardy. And Obamacare seems to be the first to go because that case is a week after the election. Doesn't matter if Biden wins. He won't be inaugurated until January 2021, which means that will likely scrap Obamacare as we know it. But 141 remaining competitive states. Biden actually does lead in New Hampshire and Maine by pretty significant margins. He's likely to get a very strong bump in Arizona. It's possible it moves back up into the likely column. North Carolina could move back into the Biden column. Florida could move back. The only thing that I've seen from Florida from the Democratic Party is Bloomberg's money. The Florida GOP has done significantly better than the Florida Democrats over the past couple of election cycles, whether it's a midterm election or whether it's a presidential election. The Florida GOP is always on top of their game. First, it was, messing up with voter registration. The Republican Party did it in numbers that the Democratic Party couldn't even compare in Florida in 2020. Now, in terms of money on hand, I recently saw this tweet. This was shocking. $127,000 on hand for the Florida Democratic Party, $3.8 million for the Florida GOP. And when we're talking about Florida, the Democratic Party there has just done so horribly. Even in a Democratic wave year, where the Democratic Party was able to win the national midterm popular vote in the House of Representatives by 9%. They lost a Florida Senate race where they had an incumbent. They lost a Florida governor race where they were poised to win. So looking at Florida, yes, it's immune to wave years, but at the fault of the Florida Democratic Party. Because in Republican wave years, it isn't exactly immune, as you might think. There are very good, strong Democratic candidates in those races that narrow them down. 2014 governor's race, or when we're talking about a regular election year. But at the same time, the Florida GOP typically does better when Republicans do better nationwide. When Democrats do better, they still do good. They still win their elections, which is exactly why Florida is a true wild card. But they will have a lot of their vote counted on election night, which I'm excited for, which means we will practically know who won the election based off who won Florida that evening. Or, it really could all come down to the Rust Belt states again. But Florida, North Carolina could very well move back in favor of Joe Biden, following the Democratic Party's push for Joe Biden in the White House. I mean, they're raising numbers that we have never seen in a presidential election year, not seen under the Obama era, not seen under Obama 2012 era, not seen under Gore, Clinton. The money that's being fundraised day after day for Biden, especially following Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, the Democratic Party is going to have a lot of money, which is exactly why I said this race was very easy to win from the beginning. 1% is that number that's going to haunt Democrats if they don't win. 1% is all they needed to do better. And if they don't do that, if they don't get that 1%, that's going to negatively reflect on the Democratic Party and Joe Biden as well as a candidate. But the Democratic Party still today is poised to win. Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, these are all states that the Democratic Party very well could make inroads in. David Perdue, 2016, if anyone saw that John Ossoff ad today, it was very good. I mean, all it did was take David Perdue's 3 speeches on the Senate floor talking about how, do not confirm during a lame duck session. Do not confirm during a presidential election year. And that was 4 years ago. And the fact that the Republicans have completely flip-flopped is very bad for a lot of their campaigns, which is exactly why Susan Collins is trying to save face, why, it's very bad that Tom Tillis came out in immediate support of confirming Trump's nominee, why Martha McSally came out in immediate support. I mean, that was insane to me. She wasn't even an elected senator. She really should have been the last person to speak. But she, coming out in support of voting on Trump's nominee is something that's going to steal her reelection, but even further than what it is right now. I guess she wants to go out being liked by the GOP, but there is absolutely no data that indicates she will even have a possibility of winning. So 79 competitive states. I think these are now the true battlegrounds. I think the Democratic Party is going to solidify their lead in the states they're already leading in by lean margins: Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And in the final 40 days of the campaign season, it's not impossible for them to win over North Carolina and Florida. In fact, looking at the numbers there, they're all larger margins for Biden than Trump leads in Texas, and then Trump leads in, Iowa or Ohio. These states are pretty close. In fact, Texas is the closest out of all 4 of these states: Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, and Texas. Actually, it might be a little bit under Georgia's. Let's check Georgia. Trump +1. Yeah, I think it's a little bit over. But looking at Iowa and Ohio, actually no. So Texas is the most competitive out of all of these 4. So again, very, very close. Biden currently does very well compared to previous Democratic nominees in these states. Honestly, the impact of her death is monumental. What we're seeing is a very different idea of the election than what we thought 1 week ago. The Democratic Party is going to be in full force this election, in full force. Anyways, moving past the presidential election, let's move on to the 2020 Senate map. I'm going to try to speed through this as much as I can. I don't want to draw this video on too long, but I think a lot of my points are valid. We are seeing a very different election than, when I made my election prediction just a handful of days ago. So 17 competitive races, 17. 6-7 months ago, we were talking about maybe 10 competitive races. Let's talk about that. So the Republicans currently hold 39 seats, the Democrats 44 in terms of safe states. The safe states for the Democrats: Oregon, New Mexico, Virginia, Illinois, Delaware, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. That was poor planning on the GOP side in both Virginia and New Hampshire. For the Republicans, their safe states are Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, and West Virginia. Notable exceptions on both sides, none for the Democrats. Notable exceptions for the Republicans: Kansas, Montana, Texas, Mississippi, Kentucky, South Carolina, Alaska, I guess you could say Alabama. These are 8 races that the Republican Party in a regular year should win pretty solidly. I mean, even with Steve Bullock running in Montana, it doesn't really make sense that Montana is super competitive. But not only here, but on the presidential level, the governor level, the House of Representatives level, obviously the Senate level. So all 4 things on the ballot that are super important to the constituents here, they're all competitive. The Democrat leads in the House race. Steve Daines leads by 1% in the Senate race. Trump leads by 7% on the presidential election, and the governor's race is a Republican lead, I believe, by 5-6%. So still competitive, all within single digits. For reference, Montana went to Trump by 19% in 2016. Kansas, nobody saw this one coming. Mississippi, I guess you could have after 2018. It's not exactly going to be winnable by the Democrats, but they have shown new fundraising numbers, as all the Democratic Senate candidates have as well. Also, if Biden does actually come as close as Obama did in 2012, well, maybe we could see a competitive race, but realistically, Mississippi's going to the GOP, but still, it's not safe, which means the Republican Party will still probably have to spend money there. Mississippi, a state that, you wouldn't even consider to be remotely a toss-up. Kentucky, yes, Mitch McConnell, but then again, presidential election year, you really would have phased that one out. South Carolina, Lindsey Graham wasn't even competitive in 2008, much less 2014. Why would he be competitive now? Well, he's running against a top-tier candidate. In Alaska, Dan Sullivan wasn't even considered a competitive race months ago, and now it is. Alabama, Doug Jones should have been easily on the pathway to defeat. He's probably going to lose, but not by as large of a margin as Biden on the presidential level. And Texas, John Cornyn, he's not running against a Beto O'Rourke. He's running against MJ Hegar. And now what we're seeing is that this race is a tad bit closer than expected. But at the same time, I will say that the Democratic Party is sending a lot of money into that state on both the Biden side and the House Representative side, and of course the MJ Hegar side, which are in turn making the races more competitive across this map. So 17 competitive races. Let's be realistic. The Democrats are winning Minnesota. The Democrats are winning Michigan. They're winning Colorado. They're winning Arizona. That only puts them at 48. For the Republicans, being realistic, they're going to win Mississippi. They're going to win Kentucky. And they're probably going to win Georgia Senate special election. The rest, and they'll probably win Texas. The rest would be considered to be lean or a flip. And that flip obviously comes from the state of Alabama, where Tommy Tuberville is currently the favorite to win. So that puts the Republicans at 44. The Democrats are at 48. And here's why the vote really matters. Joni Ernst has said that she will be voting. She does support a vote for a replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This race is already super competitive. It's not out of the question that that is the final blow to her campaign. In Maine, I honestly think that Susan Collins coming out in support with the Democratic Party, voting against a potential nominee, was something that everyone expected. It may marginally help her for right now, but realistically, when people get to the ballot box, because of ranked choice voting as well, a lot of these voters who, may otherwise consider voting for Susan Collins in a midterm election year, what if this scenario is going to run through a lot of these minds? And I think this would be a very good platform for the Gideon team, just to say, you know what? It is very possible that Trump wins the election. Would you be comfortable with a Republican senator who already voted for Kavanaugh just 2 years before this to vote with Trump? Or would you rather have a Democrat who can be in opposition to his future nominee? Because what we're going to see, yes, Susan Collins is blocking the nomination on her side, I guess, voting against it up through the election. But nobody's saying anything. What if she wins and Trump wins? Obviously, she's not going to vote against her own party. Does that really make sense? It wouldn't stop anything. There's no way the Democrats could prolong it for 4 years. This is just until the next 40 days are over. She barely spoke on a lame duck session. I think Lisa Murkowski was way more specific about that. So I think this may marginally help her for now because she comes across as that bipartisan senator. People are going to start to realize, I mean, this is the immediate reaction of it, but the Democratic Party is still likely to do very well across a number of these Senate races. In Montana, abortion rights, I guess women's rights in general, very important in this state, hugely important. Let's say, Steve Daines has already not said he was not going to vote against the nomination. If we're looking at the state itself, if we're looking at who supporting who, we're seeing Steve Daines, who opposed Merrick Garland, now saying he would support a Trump nominee. That's hypocrisy at its finest. And yes, the circumstances are different because there's a Republican president and there's a Republican Senate, but the Republican Party cannot spin them saying no Supreme Court nominations in a presidential election year and then all of a sudden say, I'm voting for them. So it's going to be very difficult. It is possible Steve Bullock gets a bump from this, absolutely. Though this race isn't too national, very possible. In South Carolina, I think Jamie Harrison also gets a boost. Lindsey Graham pretty much sealed his fate with a lot of trust in these voters. His constituents aren't going to trust him anymore. He made promises to them, said, we will not nominate someone, we will not vote for someone in a presidential election year, in 2016, in 2018, and now he's flip-flopped. And that's something that is going to be not going too well with the South Carolina voters, because guess what? This race was already competitive. The overall average for Graham was plus 2.5 before he flip-flopped. It's possible that Jamie Harrison uses that new fundraising record money and is able to come back and come within a couple percentage points of the actual election and possibly even win this thing. And I don't think that the Democrats are the favorites to win in South Carolina. I'm going to revert these back to competitive races, but this is where I think that the bumps are going to go. I think the Democrats will receive a bump in Montana, in Iowa, in South Carolina. Kansas, it doesn't really matter. There's a retiring incumbent. In North Carolina, in Georgia, even in Alaska. So when we're looking at Maine, that's the only state I would say the Republican Party is probably benefiting in the immediate reaction of Susan Collins saying, I will not vote for a potential nominee. But also, it's a very real situation that Maine voters could see Susan Collins being sent back right to the Senate for another 6-year term, and Trump wins the election, which means she would just be another vote for the GOP. She would not cross over party lines. That's just not what she's shown in the past, that she voted for Kavanaugh. And that's something that really was going to that really is hurting her campaign right now. And the Supreme Court matters a lot to the Democratic Party, and they're going to be putting forth every effort to ensure that the Senate is able to block a potential Trump presidency or a potential, or work with Biden to get forward the potential Supreme Court justice. So that's pretty much it for this video. Again, if you want an update on where the senators stands today on who they're voting for or if they will vote for an RBG replacement, 21 votes for yes, 29 no comment, 1 formerly opposed, silent now, 49 no's or Democratic votes. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. In the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2020 election prediction videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Check out the merch in the description down below, and I will see you all later today.